Kia ora tātou. Thanks again for being here at TOP's AGM and Raf Manji's Leaders Address. I'm Jessica Hammond, TOP's candidate for Ohariu. Wonderful to see so many of you here on this pleasant day. Let's welcome Raf Manji.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. No mai, haere mai, kia koutou, I tēnei wā. Ngā mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome, everyone. Greetings to all of you out there on the live stream. For those of you who can't make it to the beautiful Wellington weather bomb, you're really missing out. Thanks all for coming today. Great to see you here. Like to acknowledge some of our top candidates who are here. Bob Mason, I can see. Onslow West, put your hands up, Bob. Well done. Yep. Barbara Hay from the Lower Hutt. Good luck, Barbara. Also like to acknowledge our hopefully future mayor of Wellington, Tori Whānau. Tēnā koe, Tori. I think you'll like the housing stuff we're going to talk about later. So look, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. I took over the leadership of TOP 8 months ago, and it has been quite a journey. People have been coming, people have been going, babies are being born. Hi, Shai. Hope everything's going with baby Eve. And it's been a time of rebuilding. You know, this is version 3.0. TOP's had a few goes. It's built a lot of interest, a lot of support. Hasn't quite got there. Third time lucky for sure, no doubt about that. So the last 8 months, I've been traveling around the country, talking to people, meeting people, building the team. We've done a big lump of market research, trying to understand what people are really concerned about, what the drivers are, what's going to shift their thinking. And one of the clearest things that's come back to us is this sense of disillusionment. It's palpable. People kind of are unsatisfied. They don't see a vision for the future. They're worried. They're struggling. Now, the question for us is, how do we deal with the political realities? Like many sectors in New Zealand, we have a lot of cozy cartels, whether it's the grocery sector, the banking sector, the energy sector, the building product sector. It's nice profits. And it's much the same as Parliament. The 5% threshold is very high, and it's very difficult, as we've seen over the years, for parties to get in and stay in. And even though the Law Commission actually reviewed this in 2012 and said drop the threshold to 4%, we're still having another working group about it. So we have to deal with these political realities. We have to deal with the conversation around the wasted vote. And what I would say to people is, no vote is ever wasted. You're sending a message, and that is really important. It may not always result in somebody being elected or a party being elected, but it's still important. It's your fundamental right in a free, liberal, democratic society. So how are we going to get into Parliament? Well, I'm going to win Ireland. Ireland's home for me. Moved there in 2002 from London. Yes, I've been living up here for the last year and a half, but I'm down there very regularly. And people always ask me, are you going to run for mayor? Are you going to run for mayor? No, thank you. I don't want that job. I've done my bit in local government. But would you come back and stand as the MP for Ireland? And a few things have changed in Ireland. The previous MP, Jerry Brownie, who served for a long time, is not standing. There's a first-term Labour MP who is quite new to the position, and it's a wide open contest. I came second in 2017, running a 7-week campaign. We're starting the campaign right now for Ireland. We've got a year. We've got a great team on the ground. We've already got a lot of support. I think we can win it, and it will take us into Parliament 2023. And I think it will help with our party vote as well. Now, let's get to the business end of things. We know we have some huge challenges out there. The last couple of years, particularly with COVID, the COVID policies from the Reserve Bank and the Minister of Finance, stoking a massive property boom, huge upward pressure on house prices and rents, continues to make life difficult for people. It's a major challenge. What are we going to do about it? Well, you're going to find out. The elephant in the room, though, it's something we've been talking about for such a long time, and it is the role of housing in our economy. It has led to an unproductive economy, over-investment in housing, house prices that are simply unaffordable. And we've been having this conversation. I was reading a lot of stuff from Nick Smith. 2014, 2016, he was the Minister of Housing. He understood this. He was talking about it all the time. He was talking about debt to income ratios. He was talking about affordability. There was a statement, I think, in the House where Phil Twyford was saying to him that the number of people in unaffordable housing where they were paying more than 30% of their disposable income on rent was rising. Well, look where we are now. And why haven't we been able to change it? Because the political interest has been there, but the policies haven't. So today we're going to be announcing some changes around that. Our broad vision, as many of you know, is to change the tax and welfare system so that it is more productive. We want an innovative economy. We talk about it all the time. We want high tech in agriculture, in software, gaming, health, but we can't quite seem to deliver it. And that's because too much of our investment goes into housing. We need to change that. We also have an entrenched poverty sector. Too many people scrambling to get by, too many people on benefits, too many people who just cannot pay their day-to-day bills. So our goal is still to have a universal basic income. But we also realize that's quite challenging. It's a big piece of work. We know our administration system struggles. We saw the challenges with the cost of living payment, going overseas, going to people who weren't actually living. We know there's a lot of work to do there. So what we're going to propose today is a two-phase roll-in of our overall tax package. Our goal is for a UBI, a universal basic income in New Zealand by 2029, which will be the end of our second term in Parliament. But in our first term, what we're calling phase one, which will start when we arrive in Parliament this time next year, hopefully, yes, is a big tax switch. What we need to do when we're approaching a big problem like this is split it up into little bits. And people have constantly told us, we don't really understand. The policy is so big, it's quite complicated, we don't understand it. So we're going to split it up into bite-sized pieces so that they can, and that they can support it. And that's actually how you eat an elephant. What we're going to propose today is a tax switch. It's not going to be new expenditure. It's going to be fully costed. It's going to be fiscally neutral, but it's going to rebalance a system that we know is completely out of kilter. And nobody so far has had the courage to actually make the hard decisions. We're proposing those today. We hope they will be supported. On the income side, we need higher incomes. Our incomes are too low. There was a time in the last government where New Zealand was promoted as a low-wage economy. I don't think that's really what we want. We actually want a high-wage economy. We want people to have enough money in their pockets from their labours to provide for themselves. We want people to be supported so that if they're not in work, they have enough money to survive. So we're proposing the introduction of a new $15,000 tax-free threshold. That means you will pay no tax on the first $15,000 that you earn. We're shifting the tax thresholds around. Our goal is for a single tax on income by 2029, but we're shifting the thresholds around, which will deliver a $6.35 billion boost to incomes. An approximate number before you get too excited. This is going to really shift the ability for people to have more money in their pockets. And that's absolutely critical. People have talked about it for a while. We know Australia has a tax-free threshold. New Zealand has really been behind the play on this. It's a huge boost to people's pockets. Now, that's a lot of money. The question is, where is it going to come from? Well, we'll get to that. Because it's not just about those who are working. We also have to look after our vulnerable and our children. And so we are also proposing an income support boost of $900 million, primarily to children and people with disabilities. 500 million of that is allocated to an expansion of what's known as the in-work tax credit. This is a tax credit for families with children who are working. Children from families where they don't have regular work or are on benefits have been excluded from this for a long time. The government has refused to support them. The Child Poverty Action Group has been campaigning on this for years. We're going to support that. That's going to make a huge difference to people, some 150,000 families who have children who need extra support. We're also looking at the disability sector, and we're going to increase support to people who are collecting a disability allowance, as well as those for families who have children who are disabled. We're going to put $400 million into their pockets. They have been struggling, and particularly through COVID. Can you imagine looking after disabled children at a time like this? And they have been crying out for extra help. We're going to give it to them. I mean, frankly, yeah. I mean, they often say you're judged by how you support your most vulnerable. And I don't think we've been doing a good job. We need to get better, and that's what we're going to do. And we know in the big picture that the universal basic income has a huge impact on families in precarious work and precarious lifestyles. It's so important. If we want to build social cohesion in our communities, we need to look after them. It's as simple as that. Now the fun bit, how are we going to pay for this? Well, it's kind of important because I've seen announcements just in the last week, spending announcements from the Greens, $3 billion on extra child support. Totally support it. But how are you going to pay for it? National talking about their tax cuts, pay for it by cutting waste or things like that, bad spending. Great, well, tell us what spending, what waste. So as well as supporting our most vulnerable, and here's another bit actually that I should come back to, is it's not just about money. One of the things we've discovered looking at working for families and just our incredibly complex welfare system, which quite frankly, nobody can understand, even the people trying to operate it, is that we have all these ridiculous sanctions. And the story here, which I put up, which is a great story, it's from a Stuff journalist, Olivia Shivas, who's done a lot of great work writing stories about the disabled community. As this couple, they got married. And then suddenly the husband lost his allowance because they were married. They weren't married the day before. Suddenly being married meant that you had less money coming to you. Absolutely outrageous. And I probably wouldn't have put this story up except I'd had this reported to me by somebody else. I met this young couple and they were living happily together. They were a mix of work and education. They were receiving some allowances, that the woman was receiving some allowances. And then they decided to get married. Lovely, happy days. The day after they got married, she lost her allowance. And she goes to MSD, hey, what happened? And they said, oh, you got married? And she said, well, yeah. She said, well, your husband can support you now. I mean, it's like, come on, what century are we in? So, sanctions relating to relationship status need to go. Work status, if you're on benefits and you're trying to work, do some part-time work or get a job, you're actually worse off. We need to get rid of those abatements. We want to encourage people to be out there working. And of course, we know UBI would deal with that. We're not quite there yet, but we need to support it. Anyway, I keep talking about how we're going to pay for this stuff. For those who have been following our work over the last year, or following me, talking about this stuff on social media, we have to tax property properly. It's as simple as that. I mean, there is no way through this. And the fact that we're in this situation is because the politicians have not had the courage to do it. And the Prime Minister, who probably would support this, basically said she won't bring it in as long as she's Prime Minister. Well, sorry, you might have to move on. Or you could support a land value tax because it's not a capital gains tax. It's kind of like a capital gains tax, but just every year and a small bit. So we will bring in a land value tax, long being regarded as the most efficient tax on property, captures unearned income. It's been in New Zealand in the past, from 1891 to 1991. It's in Australia. Why don't we just copy what the Aussies do? You know, it save us all a lot of time. It will incentivize the productive use of land. It will capture essentially the unearned income. When your land price goes up, you haven't done anything to earn that. If you build a nice house or a block of apartments, fantastic. We don't care. We want that. And the great news is, we've got, let's say, a block of apartments here, empty section next door, they pay the same tax. Build on your empty sections. Mayor, come on. And the great thing for the accountants, it's a really easy tax to collect. We have one of the best land valuation systems in the world. We already collect levies through rates. It's all there. It's equitable. It's fair. And you cannot evade it. You cannot stick your capital into trust. It doesn't matter. The land is there. You can't move it. We'll collect the tax. Thank you very much. It incentivizes and removes land banking. It's a cost. If you're sitting there with an empty section, you're going to be paying more tax. Sorry. People with empty homes in Auckland, we hear some 30,000, 40,000 sitting there empty. Overseas owned properties, they will all pay extra tax. They won't be getting the income tax cut on the other side, so that's actually quite good for us. All those empty homes all over the place will now pay more tax. It will replace the Bright Line tax. And I have to say, I mean, whoever came up with that name deserves a medal. The Bright Line tax. I mean, what the hell does it mean? It's just, you know, it'll be one of the most bizarre things that you can imagine, you know, this policy meeting. We need to come up with a tax, a name for a tax that no one will know it kind of what it means. Okay, that's good. We'll get rid of that. We'll make this thing really simple. I don't care how long you own your house for, how many times you sell it, whatever. Every year we'll be collecting 0.75% on the value of residential land in New Zealand. Thank you very much. They're already calling. They're already calling. We're happy to share our policies with anyone. This is a fundamental shift, but it's been done before. That's the critical thing. And housing. Well, we just need more and more and more. The public housing waiting list is just an indictment on our collective failure. And I'm not into blaming particular governments or particular people. We just haven't done it. It's our fault, you know? We have not got behind government to build enough housing. It's a huge problem. We have kids living in cars. We have families growing up in motel rooms. That's appalling stuff. I mean, it's just incredible. And because it's not where we live, we can ignore it. We can't ignore people sleeping on the streets out here, though. We need to do something for them. And what government has done is delivered higher house prices, higher rents, unaffordable housing. It needs to change. Now, the people who are going to solve this actually are not the government. The people who are going to solve this are the communities themselves. We have a huge community housing association sector in New Zealand, some 100 organizations who are in their communities building homes, but also building communities. So today, we're going to announce a major support for them with a $3 billion housing development fund for community housing associations to build houses and communities. I mean, as a number, that's about 1% of GDP. It's peanuts, absolute peanuts. They are ready to go. And in fact, in the last 5 years, looking at the public housing dashboard, the community housing sector has delivered almost 2 to 1 in advance of Kanga order. Government doesn't need to be doing this stuff. Let the communities do it for themselves. And all I would say to them is, if you want more money, you can have it, no problem. We want you to clear the public housing waiting list as quickly as you can and then build future supply into the system. This is absolutely critical. They have the ability to do this. They need the money. We're going to provide it. So when we think about housing, we need to do a lot of things. You can't just do one thing. You've got to pull a lot of levers at the same time. So what are we doing? Land value tax. That essentially makes densification. We need more land supply. Now, land supply on its own doesn't work because you need the houses on top, but we absolutely need it. So we completely support the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, and we support the MDRS. And for councils who think they can do it better, they need to demonstrate that they have zoned more supply than what is potentially zoned under the MDRS. Then we can talk. We're also, a policy that is an old top policy. We will return GST to councils on new builds. That incentivizes councils to consent more properties as quickly as possible. There's only one proviso: they can only use it for infrastructure development. So it's a win-win. Incentivizes quicker consents and incentivizes the infrastructure in the ground, which is critical. Now, a couple of other things. And this is what I mean about all the levers. We could have announced any one of these policies and they would have been quite interesting, but there's more. One of the big issues in housing, particularly in New Zealand, where, let's face it, housing investment is a national sport, is the ease of credit. Impact on house prices. If you're an owner occupier, if you're trying to buy a house, you should be dreaming of this property. The amount of people who have been outcompeted by people in the leverage game, essentially the speculative game, is appalling. And it is something that the banks love because they make loads of money every time they issue a new mortgage. It's money for old rope, as we used to say. We're going to change that, and that is going to make a huge difference to our housing market. There's another thing as well. So we will support the rental market because people need rental homes. I think about build the homes that we need for our communities. Look at the state of things outside. The crime, the lawlessness, the entrenched poverty, the social dysfunction, the family violence. This is where it all comes from. If people don't have warm, safe homes and communities to live in, we have bad news. And that's what we've been getting. And there's one more lever I'd like to pull since I'm in the lever machine. And that is the debt burden. Currently, beneficiaries owe over $2 billion to the Ministry of Social Development. They get benefits here, they pay back here. Why do they owe that money? Because they can't afford to live. They're constantly borrowing to get food on the table, to pay the rent. It's Peter and Paul and all the rest of it going around. It's got to stop. The easiest way to do that is rip it up and start again. So we will be we just have to admit we have got these settings wrong and we have to clear it away. Debt jubilees, been around forever. This is actually this is a much better policy than cost of living for these people. There's about over 200,000 people here. The amounts are not huge per person. Wipe it out, start again. And I will acknowledge that the Green Party supported. I just wanted to acknowledge the Green Party also have this policy, which I came across when I was doing some research on this, so absolutely support that. I stared at this picture so many times because it was just like, okay, this is what we need to do. So let's summarize what we've announced today. A major tax switch leading to higher incomes and a major income support package. And look, let's be frank, all these numbers are approximate. They can be moved around any way you like once you've got hold of the models. That's going to cost just over $7 billion. We're going to introduce a land value tax to fund it, which will also raise around $7.2 billion. It's a critical tax switch. This is fiscally neutral. This is no new spending. This is actually recalibrating a system which is totally out of control. And we're also making social investments. And that's the way to look at these things. The debt write-off is a social investment in our people, in our communities. The impact, I mean, I've been with people when I've put them into bankruptcy or personal insolvency. You know, the relief, even though it's a terrible thing to do, is these people cannot live a normal life when they are under the millstone of debt. It's a terrible thing. And, you know, if they took it out to do things like buy fancy cars or holidays or houses or whatever, they're not. They're just trying to live at a very basic level. The Housing Development Fund. This is going to be transformative. To be able to let the community housing sector know that they can start building now. The money is there. It will be funded cheaply at central government borrowing rates. They've got land, they can work with people, they can get on and they know the money is there. It's absolutely critical. One of the biggest risks in development is the funding to actually build the dwellings themselves. This is a major policy shift. One of the reasons I got involved in TOP, and you know, when Jeff kindly said, oh, TOP's looking for a new leader. It's like, oh, really? Okay. Thanks, mate. I thought, oh, God, I think I've had enough of politics. I mean, I love politics and policy, but doing it, it's a tough job. It's a tough gig. But I kind of thought, this is so important. It's just so important. The status quo that we have had in New Zealand for the last 20 years, whether it's national Labour, whatever, has not worked. The status quo must go. We have delivered him. We have delivered incredible increases in house prices. Yes, awesome. Top of that, we're the best in the world at that. But it's very bad policy. We have delivered on the back of that unaffordable rents. If we can bring house prices down, rents will come down too. That's the key. We have delivered children living in motels and cars at an entrenched level. And then we see the crime on the back of it. How can you blame people? The place is a mess. The status quo must change. And I was taken by this quote that our Prime Minister made at the UN General Assembly 10 days ago, talking about climate change, talking about nuclear weapons, talking about the internet and disinformation, these big challenges we have to deal with. And she said, we have the means. We just need the collective will. Well, I think in terms of our domestic challenges, we do have the means. We absolutely do. And I believe we do have the collective will. That's what she told us back in 2017. I believe that, and I still believe that. And if you believe it, join us, support us, donate to us, and let's make it happen. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Thus ends the sermon. Thank you everyone for coming along. Let's get into it. It's really important. It matters. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.